Well, welcome everyone to the Ho'okele Friday, Aloha Friday podcast. My name is Becky Sampson. It's good to be back. I just tell you, we had a long break in August, and it's fun to be back talking to our alumni, talking and reconnecting. We had a great show last week. Great job, Eddie, for having Millie come on. So today is going to be an interesting one because we're going to be having Chad Ford on the show today, who is a professor of mine and who I've been working really closely with this last year. And it's going to be fun to hear the backstory of how he got to BYU Hawaii and all the great work that he's doing around the world. If you don't know much about Chad, he's got a vast experience in multiple countries helping with conflict resolution. So we'll go ahead and welcome Chad. Welcome. Yay.
Hey, aloha, Becky.
Aloha. Thanks for joining us today and being willing to take, I know you're super busy all the time.
Start of the semester, we've got 3,200 students back and live in person, but that's amazing. That's just partly what I think makes this so great. So
oh, it's wonderful, and you can feel the buzz. You can feel the buzz for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, well, tell everybody kind of as we get started, tell us kind of your backstory, because I know I've heard so many stories of your life and the work that you do, but I don't know how many people know, including myself, know the backstory of where you came from. How did you end up on an island at BYU Hawaii?
Yeah.
So
I was born and raised in Kansas City, Missouri, Raytown to be more specific, but and grew up in a home that we had a lot of challenges and struggles. My father, coming home from Vietnam, was diagnosed with spinocerebellar degeneration, which dramatically affected his life and really the trajectory of our whole family's life. An incurable disease that shortened his life, pretty dramatically. And as a teenager, my family encountered the church actually when I was quite young. When I was 2 years old, they were converts to the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints when I was 2. And then after, some family problems and a period of inactivity in the church, I encountered the church again as a teenager. And it was a really powerful, life-changing experience for me, answering a lot of questions that I had about what the purpose in life was, all the challenges and struggles that I saw my family go through, that I was going through, all the racial tension that was happening in my hometown in Kansas City, and so many other things. I felt like the gospel gave me, some answers and some sense of purpose and what have you. And so I was really excited to actually, what I wanted to do was go to film school and become a filmmaker. I think my dream was to be George Lucas. I'm a huge, also all my students know, huge Star Wars fan, and actually applied to USC. But I also applied to BYU, and BYU had a up and coming film school at the time. It certainly wasn't USC's film school, but there was a lot of reasons that went into it. But I ultimately decided that after growing up primarily around non-LDS people, that it would be a really great experience to spend a semester in an LDS environment, to go to BYU. I was planning on going on a mission for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints at the time, and thought that this would be a great opportunity for me to learn more and prepare for the mission as well. And so after graduating from high school, I went off to BYU for a semester, where I was in film school there as a film major. And then I left for my mission to the California San Bernardino mission. And that mission was an amazing life experience for me. Much of it out in Death Valley, in California,
in the middle of nowhere.
In the middle of nowhere. In fact, I think we've got a slideshow of a picture of me standing next to a huge Joshua tree, out in the middle of the desert. And while I was in cities for some of that, a lot of my time was out trekking in the desert. I also had the opportunity to serve in a Samoan ward and a Tongan ward while I was on my mission. And that rekindled something in me. My ward back home in Kansas City was the Independence 4th Ward and had a significant Pacific Islander population within my ward. Had a Bishop Tonga. The Amus were there. The Fonui Moanas were there. There was a number of different families, and not having grown up around a lot of LDS people and having a very Pacific character to my ward in Kansas City, a lot of things, like I thought luau's and ward activities were like the same thing. Like I thought every ward in the church, like, had luau's and long rice and Kahlua pig. And
well, that's what I was going to say. You probably from a young age, having that experience in the mission and being in your ward, having so many Polynesians, that's kind of where it started with you wanting to be in this culture. Yeah.
Exactly. I loved it. It felt like home for me. And so then to be able to serve in both the Tongan and Samoan ward on my mission, and having a Tongan and a Samoan companion, including a companion that was from Laie, it just started to become clear to me that maybe I'd be more comfortable. And it seemed like a really exciting journey to come to BYU Hawaii. So while I was on my mission, I applied to BYU Hawaii, got accepted there. I had no idea, by the way, what I was going to actually do at BYU Hawaii. They did not have a film school.
That's what I was going to say. I mean, you wanted so much to do the film stuff. What made you switch?
I didn't know how long I was going to stay there. I mean, I really thought maybe this is going to be a semester, maybe it's a year. I just didn't know. I just felt like I should be there. When I got here, I fell in love with it. I fell in love with the culture. Being here in Hawaii, I mean, it was everything from the intercultural nature of the school to obviously the just being in Hawaii and what have you. I knew after like a couple of weeks, oh, I'm graduating from here. I'm never going back. Much to the chagrin of my family a little bit. And then I had to figure out, which I think a lot of students do. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do film school, but like I said, there wasn't really even a class that I could take on it. And so I also like to write. And so I thought, maybe I'll be an English major, and started as an English major after about a semester here at BYU Hawaii. I picked that, and I struggled with it. It just wasn't what I thought was going to really click with me. I liked the writing aspect of it, and I did end up minoring in creative writing while I was here. But the reading and doing literature analysis or whatever, it just really wasn't for me. And I'm actually really grateful. The chair of the English department, Barbara Elkington, pulled me into her office one day, and she sat me down and she said, I don't think this major is for you. And I was partly insulted and also partly like, she's right. And I could feel it. And she told me, I've been thinking a lot about what you've been writing and what you like to talk about in class. And have you ever thought of history as a major? And I'm like, I really enjoy history classes, but I can't imagine myself being a historian. I had a really this is a stodgy sort of, major, and I wasn't really interested. And she said, the chair of our history department, I think you'd really love him. His name's Paul Spickard. Interesting, at BYU Hawaii, and some of our alumni will remember Paul. Paul was not a member of the church, yet he was the chair of our history department and brought a very unique perspective to the world and to BYU Hawaii. Back then and to this day, most of the professors on campus are members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, but Paul wasn't. And I went into his office and I sat down, and he pulled a Book of Mormon off his shelf and slid it across the desk and slid it to me and said, "Have you read this book?" And I said, "Yes, sir. I've read it." And he said, "I haven't. Tell me what's inside it."
Oh, wow.
I was like, okay. So we started talking, and I just found him to be a very clever. He was having some fun with me. I was really intrigued with what he was doing and what he believed in. And then I met the rest of our history faculty that included Lance Chase, who was just an absolute legend here as a professor, who unfortunately died of cancer while he was a professor here. David Grandy, who went on to teach philosophy at BYU a few years later. And then the person that really became my mentor here at BYU Hawaii, Uncle Bill Wallace, who ultimately would go on to found the Hawaiian Studies program here at BYU Hawaii. And Uncle Bill was an attorney and a family lawyer at the time, and was bringing some of that perspective and public law, but he was also teaching these Hawaiian history classes. And, here's this guy from Kansas City, Missouri, couldn't be more haole but had such a love for Polynesia and the Pacific Island culture that I just ate up everything that came out of his classes. I was so fascinated with this, and fascinated with a movement that he was working on, which was the Hawaiian sovereignty movement, that was talking about the illegal overthrow of the Hawaiian government in the 1800s, and looking at the rights of the indigenous Hawaiians to get their land back and to get their governance back. And all of this really fascinated me and started to build within me this really interest in injustices that had happened in the world, conflict that was going on in the world, seeing him as both a professor and an activist and as a peacemaker in the
Why do you
world.
think that is? Why do you think that started growing within you at that time?
I think it was a lot of experiences, Becky, that started even when I was young, and seeing
Mhm.
sort of racial injustice back in my hometown in
Yeah.
Kansas City, Missouri, and the way that African Americans were treated,
Mhm.
growing up and seeing it around me. And then also this unique experience at BYU Hawaii of seeing people from cultures around the world, that there were conflicts and people didn't always get along, but generally the harmony and the understanding and the interconnectedness that people felt was something that I thought was really unique and special about BYU Hawaii. And I felt it, and I knew that something was different here
Mhm.
than existed out in the world. And I was actually quite curious about how outside the world there was so much conflict and so much strife. And here we were able to achieve a level of peace and harmony that, again, wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but was aspirational to
So,
me.
so one thing I want to bring up that I thought was really interesting is that, I mean, obviously we're just starting a new semester, right? And a lot of students are feeling the same way you did when you came,
Yeah.
and how important it is as staff or faculty to help direct the students in the direction. I mean, it sounds like once you kind of got a little guidance or mentorship in the right direction is when your real desire to get into this kind of field with peace building grew. Would you say that?
Yeah, yeah. Though as an undergraduate, I had no idea what peace building was.
Yeah.
To be honest, I didn't even know that term.
Mhm.
But I looked up to Uncle Bill and started to think about law school
Mhm.
as a way of maybe working in human rights, for example, or indigenous rights, or something like that. He really truly was a mentor, and
Mhm.
I knew I couldn't be him. I wasn't Native Hawaiian, and there were certain things that I wouldn't necessarily be able to work on. But his example to me was a really powerful one. I also had several other mentors, Kathy Ward, who was in the English department, even though I wasn't an English major, who was this woman who taught African American literature on campus and was always interested sort of in civil rights and the struggle there. She was an awesome mentor to me as well. And then it was really my senior year. President Shumway became the president. He was the vice president of the university at the time. Elton Wade was the president when I was here at first. And he became the new president. And Neil A. Maxwell, the Quorum of the 12 Apostles, came out for President Shumway's inauguration and gave a speech in the Canon Activity Center. And I was there. And he talked about the founding of BYU Hawaii, and talked about David O. McKay and his journey in 1921 and the vision in 1921, and going around the world and seeing all the destruction that had happened in World War I, and seeing the suffering that he saw and the destruction around the world, and then coming here to Laie in 1921 and seeing again sort of the same thing that I was seeing around me. A lot of people from a lot of different cultures that were finding ways to work together and live together. And then he has his prophetic vision to build a school here. And the thought was really around world peace. It really was about how could we bring people from around the world into one place and teach them how to go back and live and be leaders in the world, but leaders towards peace. And then,
Mhm.
of course, and this is something that's always like, it sits deep with me personally. Um, when David O. McKay read the dedicatory prayer that David O. McKay uttered on February 12th in 1954, that from this school will go men and women who will be influences towards the establishment of peace internationally. There was a fire that just burned within me when I heard those words, and I went home and I pondered that for a bit. And I actually was thinking about a number of my international friends and students that I'd met, who were just so impressive to me, and thought, maybe maybe he was talking about that guy, or maybe this guy, or maybe this woman's going to go and be prime minister of her country or whatever. I could actually sort of think of students that I knew that really fit this. But as I prayed and pondered more about it, the Spirit sort of rested upon me that David O. McKay wasn't just talking about them. He was talking about everybody, every alumni that was coming to this school. And that also includes you, Chad. And I could feel it. And, there was something, we all have funny connections and all ways of sort of making things personal. The day of that dedicatory prayer was February 12th. That's my birthday. And there was something just about that sort of connected to me, even though I wasn't alive or born, not that old. It connected with me in a deep way. And I remember going to Uncle Bill and telling him, I still think I'm going to go to law school, but I really want to learn how to do peace. And, how do I do that? And he's like, I don't know, but, of the schools that I got accepted to, one of them was Georgetown Law School. They had a really great international program. They had a lot of things that sort of connected sort of to that diplomacy and things like that. Several secretaries of state had come out of Georgetown or whatever. And so I just decided I'm going to keep this journey going when I get to law school. I have no idea what I'm going to do, but there was a fire in me now that
what did
I
you
felt
major?
confident.
What did you major in your bachelor's before you went to law school?
In history, yeah, I ended up in history.
History, okay.
Yeah. And my first semester at Georgetown, I'm actually just like, I have no idea. This doesn't have anything related to peace. In fact, lawyers actually create more conflict than they solve. And I'm learning about suing people and criminal law, and all of these things. And I'm really feeling like maybe I'm in the wrong place, and I don't understand why I'm here. And I'm also getting deeply in debt, paying my way through school to be here. And then I'm in the hallway at Georgetown, and I see a poster for Dennis Ross, who was the chief negotiator for U.S. peace in the Middle East at the time. And it was advertising a speech or something that he was going to give on campus. And I decided, I'm interested sort of in this, and this sort of is connected to sort of peace, so I'll go. And as he's speaking and talking about the peace process in the Middle East and what he does and the mistakes that were made and the challenges there, that same experience, that fire starts burning within me as I'm sitting in the audience. And I'm like, all of a sudden I just realized as I'm sitting in the room, this is why I'm here, for this moment. So I wait in line, I go up, ask him, hey, this is what I want to do. Peace building, what do I do? And he's like, well, he kind of gives me the runaround a little bit. And as I get more specific with him, he actually sends me to another professor that's off campus at George Mason University, Wallace Warfield, who, I'll go visit the next day. I skip school, take the train out to George Mason University, meet with him. He slides the book from Martin Luther King's Strength to Love across his desk. I read it under a tree that day, and my life is forever changed. I walk back into his office and say, okay, I got it. I understand why I'm here. I know what I'm going to do, and ended up getting a master's degree in conflict analysis and resolution out of George Mason, as well as finishing my doctorate in law at Georgetown.
So you really, when you went into law school, and I know you and I have had this conversation as well, because I'm considering going to law school as well, but it was scary because you didn't quite know why you were there. How far into it that you were there before you realized that day? With the book?
I was about a semester in, so not too bad, but I didn't start my conflict program until the next year. And I ended up doing this sort of ad hoc program. And the conflict program was really new. There weren't at that time many majors at all. This is sort of pre 9/11 and where there's really a huge sort of burst of this at the time. But I loved every day of school. I felt like not only was I learning cool things about the world and human beings, I was learning cool things about myself and learning how to be a better father and a better husband and a better community member. And one of the things that I loved about studying peace building was obviously there's this knowledge and these tools that you get to help, but it's so personally applicable and helpful in my own personal relationships. I knew like right away, like, this is where I'm meant to be. This clicks in ways. This is my vocation. And I also knew something else by my senior year there. I wanted to take this back to BYU Hawaii.
Mm.
I had a pretty clear vision that given everything I'd learned about President McKay, everything that I knew about BYU Hawaii, this needed to be a program and a major at BYU Hawaii. And I wanted to bring it back. That was my absolute clear-headed goal coming into my senior year, was that I would practice this, but I wanted to teach it as well. And the only place that I wanted to do it was BYU Hawaii. Now that took uh, realistically about 4 years before I actually ended up joining back here at the faculty at BYU Hawaii. I came back here and spoke several times and did several other things, but it took about 4 years before a job opened up for me to come back here. And really interestingly, the job opened up when I had expressed a deep interest in doing this to one of my mentors, Kathy Ward, who was ready to retire.
Mhm.
And she talked to Philip MacArthur, who was the chair at the time at the Intercultural Studies program, and Chad Compton, who were both working in there. And she said, look, I'll cut you a deal. If you bring in Chad now, I'll retire a year early to be able to bring him in. And to me, one of the greatest gifts that I was ever given. I mean, that was a huge sacrifice on her part to retire early, to basically give me her job, to come back and her office where I started and everything else. And I mean, I can't think of a more like selfless mentor than at the end of the day to essentially hand their job over to one of the young mentees and give me the chance to come here and teach and start a peace building program.
You know, one thing I love that you said that it took you time, right? It's a lot of times people think that success is, or when we go after our dreams, it's something that's an automatic thing, right? These doors open all over the place. But it took you 4 years. Did you let people know at BYU Hawaii that you wanted to come back, or were you
I
like,
did. I think I annoyed people at
okay,
BYU Hawaii that I wanted to come back. I'm not sure there was a soul here that didn't know what I wanted, but it was challenging. You know, I was proposing to teach something that wasn't really a major at any undergraduate institution in the United States at the time,
but if
and
it's perfect.
yeah, it was only at a handful of graduate school programs. So, you know, you're working with other professors who haven't heard of this. Is this a real academic discipline? Like, what is going to be taught and where? I mean, and then where do you fit in? Because programs just don't, you know, fall off trees. And so even when I got here and I started in international cultural studies, there weren't any peace building classes. I was teaching some history classes, I was teaching some communications classes, you know, some things like that, and trying to build a curriculum, but actually experiencing some significant resistance to it, and just in part because it was so non-traditional
Mm-hmm.
and nobody really knew how to put their arms around this. And was this something students were actually going to take? Could students get jobs off this? Was their career path forward? I mean, there was a lot of skepticism, as there often is with peace, and my stubborn insistence that we don't call this conflict resolution or conflict, you know, management, or, you know, something more muscular like that, but we actually call it what I believe it is, which is building peace. And that's tied directly to President McKay's vision, and tied directly to where I think a gospel perspective about this is that, like Zion, peace is something that you build, and it's something that you build both with individuals, but you also build into structures, that you build in the way that you live and govern yourself sort of in the world, and that it touches all of these aspects of what's going to happen. It's a very interdisciplinary approach to sort of thinking about things. And it took a while for everybody. I'll just put it that way. It took a while for everybody to get on board, even after I was here. It didn't take our students long. And one of the coolest experiences, you know, that I had was before we could get classes approved, and they go through a whole committee of sort of doing that. My students were coming up to me after my history classes or my communications classes saying, hey, we want to learn more about mediation, or we want to learn more about this. And I'm like, look, I'm trying, but it's a process. And it ended up being a multi-year process to get it done. And then one student had been reading Harry Potter. This is the funniest thing. And, you know, for those of you that have read Harry Potter, in the fifth book, they have this defense against the dark arts class that the school sort of bans, and there's no way to sort of be able to teach it. And so they start working together to find a room. They called it the room of requirement, where they would just go at night and practice on their own. And so one of my students said, I think this is the answer. Could we just meet once a night? We know we won't get credit for it or whatever, but can you just teach a class anyway? And I was so touched by that. I don't know that I would have done that as a student, that in addition to my course load, I'm going to just take a class that I'm not going to get credit for or what have you.
That was a class in mediation? Is that what you said?
Yeah. And so we started teaching the first peace building classes that weren't really classes. There was no credit for it. We just would find a random open room. Sometimes we'd have it at my house. And the very first group of what I call peace building students that unfortunately will never have a peace building thing on their transcript or anything that shows that they did it, that they were real pioneers. And then they began to also start to raise awareness around campus and to ask for a more formal program. And then a few years later, we got our first class and certificate program.
Well, I do have a confession, because when I first got to the island a couple of years ago, 2.5 years ago, I guess, I did go and meet with David Whippy, and I loved what you guys did in the peace building, but I just thought, well, that's too frou-frou. I mean, that's like, I love this stuff. Yeah. So I got to go to business. And so I started down that business road. But I do think that that is a common, thought that most people have, is that peace building is, but it's so essential. I mean, now that I've been in it for over a year in this degree, it's so essential for what we're experiencing in the world. Like, talk a little bit about how, there's so many things that you can do with peace building in careers and in jobs and corporate and families and everything. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, our students who all ask that same question and worry about it, and their parents, if you're listening right now and you're sending a kid here and you're like, there's no way I'm going to have them take Jet's class in peace building or whatever. It's the first question. How am I going to get a job or make a living on it? And I think if you talk to all of our alumni, that's not really been the issue or the problem. There are some challenges going into peace building as a profession. It's not like accounting, where 5 accounting firms are going to show up with career services and, they're going to do interviews here on campus and you're going to have your job squared away, your senior year. That's true. You're probably not going to see things like that. But our students that have gone into family work, whether that's counseling or therapy, or going into organizational behavior work or HR, people that have gone into community work, working with nonprofits, non-governmental organizations, our students that have worked and gone into working for government and political science, conflict resolution, and large-scale work, people that have gone on to law school and done things like collaborative divorce or environmental law, a number of our students that have actually even started nonprofits around the world, whether that be in Hong Kong or Samoa or New Zealand or Salem, Oregon, or in Jordan, the country of Jordan. It's really inspiring to see the flexibility that our students have to be able to go out and actually really pursue their dreams and what they're passionate about. And we've partnered a lot with the Center for Entrepreneurship and students getting a certificate in social entrepreneurship as well. And combining that with peace building has been great. We have students that are combining their degrees with poli-sci, some with psychology as well. And many that are just doing it as a certificate and adding it on as they're an education major, for example, but they want to think about classroom management, or they're going into social work and they want to be a social worker, but they want some mediation or conflict skills, on the side, or they're going into business management and they just sort of understand that the trickiest part of any business is the human part of managing people and customers, and how difficult that is. And in fact, when we had our career services go to China and sort of ask for skill sets, they were surprised to come back and said essentially what they were asking for was conflict resolution skills. Like, that's what we would actually really like to see our students come back with. And I know for some of our Asian students, that's exactly how they've been able to sort of parlay their degree, back in, into a job. And so there's a lot of different things that people are using it for. And you can be also super creative. So we have an alumni that's doing this small nonprofit called Piece of Cake, where she helps married couples that are having conflicts by baking cakes together. And she actually has this business that she goes around and does this with. We had a student that was doing it with ballroom dancing. Some of my work, I think we have a slide on this or two, has been with Peace Players and a nonprofit that uses the game of basketball, because some people will sort of know me from my time working at ESPN and doing some other work that I did on the side covering the NBA and the NBA draft for ESPN. And I was able to actually combine those two passions together, working with this amazing nonprofit called Peace Players that works in the Middle East and
I think we
Northern
have a picture
Ireland.
of that.
Yeah, I think we do. I think we have a picture of me high-fiving some kids here. And they're in South Africa, and lately we've been launching programs in the US and Baltimore and Detroit and Brooklyn, LA, Chicago, what have you. And again, using creativity of how do you bring divided people together? Right. And this is sort of what Peace Players does and sort of allows us to do is to think about how do we bring people that are divided together? How do we build bridges? How do we create leaders who know how to do this and create space to do that, whether they're using that in their families or whether they're using that in their wards and in their callings in the church, whether they're using that in the organizations that they work for, whether they're using that in their communities as community leaders. We are in desperate need of people that have sound tools and skills and a commitment to being peace builders in the world. So what a better place than BYU Hawaii to launch those individuals. And again, whether you're going to be, we have a marine biologist who's doing a double major, and we have marine biology and conflict resolution. But there's so much conflict that exists around marine biology right now and conservation and environmental issues right now. And I have a student sort of thinking ahead. Yes, I want to do this research, but I also want to be a part of a solution to the problems that face our environment right now. So I'm picking this up as an added skill as well. There's literally no job or aspect of life that you can improve by getting better at being able to navigate conflict and sharpen your collaborative problem solving skills.
Well, I could not agree with you more, because I think it doesn't matter what field of work you go into, and even personally, the best thing is to understand how conflict affects all of us. And I remember I was going into the business HR specifically, and that's my minor, but HR, because I wanted to help people overcome with conflict or to work through conflict, I should say. Because it doesn't and actually I was having a conversation with some students in the Ho'okele department a month or so ago about that same thing. I said, it doesn't matter what business you're in. This is so normal to have conflict and to have people, say they're going to do something and then not do it, or not show up, or have different opinions. I mean, what a great skill. And what I love most that the mission of BYU Hawaii really burned deep within you, to the point where what a better place in the world that we're creating leaders. How do you be a leader? You got to be a peace builder. Yeah. You really got to be, but it doesn't mean it's peaceful. I was trying to find I did a text the other day about what peace building is. It's like, it's not peaceful. Talk a little bit about that. Because we talk a lot about that in class.
Yeah. Well, I just wrote a book kind of about that called Dangerous Love. And it's sort of a strange title, right? And when you're sort of thinking about peace, and it's this sort of paradox that when we confront conflict to create peace, we often have to walk quite a dangerous path, a scary path, a vulnerable path for us to get to the other side. And our natural reaction is conflict avoidance, or sort of conflict accommodation. So our natural reaction when we see conflict coming is to run, or to hide, or to give in, or to fight, which then leads to sort of more destructive conflict. And so, being a mediator and both working in the field, like I've worked for the last 15 years, as well as sort of teaching students and working here at BYU Hawaii, I would have students ask me all the time, you tell all these stories and you give all these lectures in class, like, where do I sort of find that? And so much of it was just sort of coming out of life experience. So a few years ago, I started thinking about really the lecture notes for my 121, my intro class, like how could I turn that into a book? And then the more I started working on it, the more I knew I didn't really want it to be a textbook. I really wanted it to be for anybody who's really struggling with a conflict at home, with a child, with a spouse, with a neighbor, with a boss at work. And recognizing that most people just aren't going to get a chance to sit through the peace building program and be able to go through classes like this and train on this. Is there a way to sort of capture all of this in a book form through stories and exercises and what have you that are really going to get there? And as I'm writing the book, I didn't have a title for the longest time. I didn't know what to call it. And Dangerous Love was actually inspired by Martin Luther King and a book that he wrote called Strength to Love. And in particular, a sermon that he gave in that book about the Good Samaritan, and this idea that what the Good Samaritan does is dangerous in helping this person on the side of the road. He didn't. The person was beaten, probably by thieves on the side of the road. There was danger to him. There was danger to the other person. Yet he shows love towards a stranger, towards someone who is not of his tribe or group. And in the process of doing that, he creates a bridge and heals and sort of helps someone. And what does that look like at home? What does that look like at work? What does that look like in my community? What does that look like in my ward? What does that look like in the world? How do we love dangerously? And I think, Becky, we hear this word love, and this is the foofy part that you were talking about, right? Like, oh, peace building, you guys are all lighting candles and holding hands or whatever. We're not talking about that kind of love. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, of course, there's love when we mean romantic love. And I'm not talking about that sort of love. And I'm not even talking about the sort of love that means like. In other words, the sort of love that, like, I love pizza, or I love chocolate, or I love my friends, or, I love my dog, or, whatever those sorts of ways are. Where real love, the hardest sort of love, the sort of love that the scriptures use as agape or charity comes in, is when I don't actually hold those feelings towards another person. I'm irritated. I'm bugged. I'm frustrated. I feel hurt by the people that I'm in conflict with. Far from feeling positive thoughts or love towards you, I may not like you. I might even hate you. I may see you as our enemy. And here you have Christ in the scriptures telling us to turn the other cheek, to 70 times 7, to love our enemies. And he's talking about a different sort of love that is a hard love. It is a vulnerable love. It feels scary to us to love people when we're in those sorts of situations, but it's exactly that sort of love that when we can exercise it and practice it towards another person, that often becomes the turning point in conflicts that move them from destructive conflict to a constructive conflict, to creating real sustainable solutions, whether that's in relationships or at work or in our community. And trying to capture in this book, and now we're using it in our classroom, how do we develop the courage to love dangerously? How do we develop the courage to turn first towards our enemies and to invite them, instead of calling them out, calling them in to a space where we can solve together the problems that face us as a couple, as a family, as an organization, as a community together. And all of this, of course, is deeply, deeply rooted in my earlier training with Wallace Warfield, who worked with Dr. King, to my own religious upbringing and background, and sort of thinking about discipleship as not just like church attendance and paying tithing and living the world of wisdom, but being a peacemaker. That discipleship is learning actually how to do what Christ calls us to do, to turn the other cheek, to love and pray for our enemies, to not be offended, to do good in the world, to be proactive in healing breaches. And, I'm always sort of touched in the scriptures that the first known sermon that Jesus gives in the scriptures is in his hometown of Nazareth, and he's quoting Isaiah. And if you don't mind, I kind of feel like, wow, we should pull this up. I know we're getting towards the end, but I was just thinking a lot about this the other day. This is in Luke 4:18. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he hath anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He hath sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to preach deliverance to the captives, and recovering of sight to the blind, to set at liberty them that are bruised. That Christ lays out his ministry right there in his very first sort of public
Mhm.
sermon, and then goes on to deepen that in the Beatitudes that he's going to give, soon thereafter in Galilee. And the reaction from the crowd is this not the son of Joseph?
Mhm.
Right? And a rejection that I still think sometimes as Christians, we still struggle with, right? We're called, in my opinion, to bind the brokenhearted, to work with the poor, to recover sight to the blind. And I know that Jesus does that literally in the scriptures, right? He heals people that are blind, but also there's so many other people who could physically see, but couldn't spiritually see. That he opens their eyes in the deepest and most profound ways, actually much more impactful than even the sort of physical vision sort of goes. And so this calling, this idea of sort of discipleship, this idea of vocation that can come from as being Latter-day Saints, to a commitment to being influences, truly influences, inviting the people around us in the world to be at peace and to establish peace internationally. That fire still burns deep inside me the same way that it did, wow, 20, 25 years ago, when I first heard about it.
Well, and it's probably really rewarding to see the students come in. You teach them the principles, and obviously this department is growing, and you're adding curriculum to it, like doing the dangerous love, things like that. But it's probably very rewarding to see people take those principles and then go out in the world and actually make a difference. I think in any professor.
Yeah, of
But
course. It's amazing to see what our students do with it, how they interpret it.
mhm.
The notes that I get back about how it maybe saved a marriage or a relationship with a parent, which to me is just as important as someone going and working in the Middle East. But people also really digging into their communities, digging into their wards, digging into their organizations, and becoming exactly what President McKay foresaw, influences, right? Establishing peace
Yeah.
where they are, wherever that is, in whatever profession they choose. And I have students that are doing everything under the sun that you could possibly think of, many of which you would never technically term doing conflict resolution or peace building, yet they are peace builders
Mhm.
within their professions, within their families, within their communities, in really powerful ways. And of course, I tell people all the time, why are you in this small school in the middle of nowhere? And, come back here, come to the mainland or come to DC or whatever. And I'm like, there's something magical
Mhm.
about this place. I have the greatest job in the world because I get to see these young people from all of these different cultures in the world, and their desires are pure, their desires to make the world a better place. I see so many of them. They work so hard. Many of them are overcoming English as their second language and trying to learn all this. They're learning mediation, which is really hard for first language speakers
So
to,
fun.
to, to learn. And they're doing it both in English and then learning it in their own language. They're thinking about cultural adaptation and how this would work back at my home, in my country, and what have you. They're often teased on campus sometimes about what they're studying. Their parents are wringing their hands about what they're going to do. Yet there's this deep commitment that I want to give more than I take. I want to heal more than I break in my life, and that's something that I want to be part of my life. And when you get to work in that environment with those sorts of young people, and Becky, we've had classes with them. You're one of them, and how many times does spirit just like flood into the room when
Oh,
somebody stands up and does something like extraordinary, or they make a move, or they talk about a relationship or something that they've healed in the life, and it floods in, and just the love that we feel for everybody in the room, like, we need you.
I have to agree, Chad. I mean, the first intro, right, is 121. I think IPB 121, and to see the light bulb starting to come, like to go off in these students' brains. I mean, I've been in this industry for many years, but it's so fun to like they're like, wow, I can make a difference, right? I can make a difference not only in my own life and my own family, but in the world, in the community. And that's what I love about this particular degree and peace building is it's life changing. And there's been so many times, and I think I've expressed this to you before, or maybe if I haven't, there's been so many times where I've come to class and had something really heavy on my heart. And we talk about whatever we talk about in mediation or in IPP, 121 or the conflict. And it's just like, that's exactly what I needed to hear. That's the tool I needed to go and handle the situation that I'm dealing with. And that is where miracles happen. And when things start changing in the world is when we start getting those tangible tools. And that's what I love about your book, right? Is I know I was part of your first class. I want to just bring that up real quick because I know we have all these slides that we didn't even go over yet.
Oh, there it is.
There's your book called Dangerous Love that you now have in all of the curriculum that we do. And I mean it's all over the place. They can find it, but it's got really great information in there on how to deal with difficult situations. And I love that you said that. It's like, you may hate these people that are in conflict, but we can still rise above it and be the leader and the soul that God wants us to be, to handle it in a way that's going to help and encourage other people to turn in the right way. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Becky. And, one of the cool things about being here is that I get to keep learning.
Mm-hmm.
I loved going to school here. It was so formative. I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be doing conflict. I wouldn't be doing peace building if it wasn't for coming here as a student, and having the interactions and the professors that taught me and paved the way. Hearing President McKay's vision for me and that desire to give back and to come back here and be in that space and be on the other side of this. Like, it's been so cool. And I get to see some of my classmates that I went to school with. I'm teaching their kids now. It makes me feel really old. But I'm teaching, some of their kids now, and they'll say, hey, yeah, my mom or dad like went to school with you when you were here. This is a unique and special place.
It really is.
It has been historically that way. We are so blessed to be here in Hawaii, and a host culture that has taught us so much about peace, and the concepts of peace that have actually come throughout the Pacific. One of the coolest things I've seen is our Pacific Islander students coming back and teaching and working in cultural principles from their cultures back into our program and teaching us all things that maybe the rest of us haven't understood or known. We're so blessed to be here on this sacred space of land that has always been a city of refuge and a city of healing. We're blessed for all of the sacrifices that have gone into building a place like this, which are in many ways almost feel impossible. And it's incredible that it's here. And we're also still living with the conflict of all of that, and the conflict of colonization and the pain that it's caused to even our host culture, and for many people that are still suffering around the world. And so despite all the peace that is here, we're also confronted with the conflict that is here, the conflict that exists even here on this island, even here in the space, and even here with our students. But we get this opportunity to try to do it better. And you hear this sometimes from President McKay, a living laboratory.
Yes, that is exactly
is
what this is.
a living laboratory where we make mistakes, where we stumble, where we fall, where I wish after 25 years of learning about this and teaching it, I was conflict free or mistake free, but still make huge and sometimes tragic mistakes in my own relationships in my own life, but still have the space and the opportunity to learn from it and to grow and to do better. This laboratory that we're all in is to me one of the most remarkable places on earth. And I feel it every time I step foot on this campus, and am so grateful to be able to connect with you and all the alumni here that I'm sure had very similar and powerful experiences when they are here and are doing their own part I'm confident in helping spread President McKay's vision and being influences for the establishment of peace internationally.
Yeah. So here's a picture of you. You said,
I'm the one in the back.
Yeah, I said before the show started, I'm like, which one are you?
Because I have hair there.
I mean, did you ever think that when you were back at that age that you'd be where you are today, now heading up this peace building program, written a book, traveled all around the world and helping all of these different countries with conflict? I mean, that's
No, I
crazy.
also thought I'd have hair now. And I don't. Yeah, of course not. I had no idea. And I think that often happens. And I try to remind our students when they're here, I didn't know when I was here. And, I try to remind all of them, you're called here, whether you think you chose to be here or not, you're called here. And that the quicker you find out why you're here and what your purpose is here and what the Lord would have you do with this education, to enter, to learn, and to go forth to serve, and how they would have you serve, again, your family, your community, and the world, the better this education will be. It was not until my senior year. And so we try earlier with our freshmen now to help them sort of understand the significance of the place, the significance of what's happening here and what they're doing. But yeah, I didn't know then. I wish I did. I would have probably done even a few more things differently.
Well, I think it is Alton Wade. If I remember correctly, somebody told me that Alton Wade said, whether you're here in Laie for 1 hour, a day, a month, a year, 10 years, you have been brought to this place for a purpose.
Yeah.
And I like that you brought up the thing is find out why you're brought there. Why are you brought here? Yeah. What is the purpose for you to be here? And what is it you need to learn, or what do you need to give?
And I also say to our alumni who may be wondering, well, what about me? Mm-hmm. There's still time. I don't care if it's been 40 years since you've graduated here. If you don't feel like you've been part of that, there's still time to be part of it.
Yeah.
And to sort of think about this sort of experience going forward, and come back to campus here in February. We're going to have our first really big peace building conference here on our campus, February 10th through 12th.
So when is that one?
February 10th through 12th. Proclaim awesome. Peace. And we plan on also inviting some really great, LDS and non-LDS scholars on to sort of talk about this, and some of our alumni to come back and talk about the work that they've been doing. But really anybody that wants to spend 3 great days, like learning from just like the greatest humans alive, about sort of this, like all that's sort of coming really soon. This is my favorite picture.
I love it. And I'm sorry, we did have some other photos that we didn't get to, but I love this one because it's right in front of the whole Actually, this is the McKay building, and this is where the peace building used to be, right?
Yeah, before we had some structural issues with the building, yeah.
Yeah, so I remember going in here and having that conversation, and I think a lot of students can relate with not understanding what our full mission is. But I'm grateful that when you came into the school, you had these series of experiences where it was revealed to you the purpose of your future, and for you to be able to be back. So, and to be a force for good, right? That's a good.
Yeah. Be a force for good.
Be a force for good, and take it one day at a time. Well, Chad, I know our time. I know you've got places to go, and our time is coming short. So I want to just thank you so much for being willing to come today and let us interview and hear the backstory of kind of how you got here and what you do. And I am very grateful for the things that I've learned this last year in your classes. I want you to know that it's impacted my life in the way that I choose to move forward with the things in my life. And I know that you've seen that, and I'm so grateful and couldn't be more supportive of the work, because if we can help them empower themselves, then they'll go out and make a difference in the world out there in the world. So,
well, thank you, Becky, for sitting through all those classes and being the student that you are, and seeing your example to others around, and how helpful you've been. Sometimes it's great to have a student that comes back a little bit older, and also even as a student ends up being able to mentor and work with so many youth. And so I really appreciate you, and I'm excited to see that you're about ready to graduate and going off to do some great things. So thank you.
Yes, one more semester and then we're done. So thank you so much, Chad. Just hang in there real quick. We'll just have a couple announcements and then I'll be right back with you. Want to thank everybody for joining us today on the show. And we're here every Friday for Aloha Friday. We interview alumni who have come to BYU, or people who have made an impact with BYU Hawaii and CCH. I just want to make sure that I have the announcement for next week. Actually, I'm going to throw it up onto the screen. For those of you, sorry, I'm kind of in the side here. For those of you who are in Utah, we're going to be having a little reunion. So it's going to be on the 18th, and it's going to be at Sky Ridge at 6 p.m. So make sure you join us and share it with everyone else that can come. Make sure you wear your swag. It's really important that people see that you have the swag, the proud swag of BYU Hawaii. So thanks again for joining us today. I'm Becky Sampson with the Ho'okele Department with the Alumni Relations. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll talk to you soon. Bye-bye.